am very honored to be able to testify on this important hearing on the Arctic and Arctic strategy. And I commend the committee. To your point, Mr. Chairman, there's a lot going on in the world, but we got to keep our eye on all strategic areas of the globe and America's interests. So I commend the committee for undertaking this hearing to understand the complexities of Arctic security and providing me an opportunity to talk about the increasing significance of the Arctic region to our nation's security. The Arctic, as you mentioned in your excellent opening statement, and by the way, you're going to hear some repetition here because I think it was so good, but the Arctic is undergoing monumental changes. Sea ice is receding, opening an entire ocean that was previously unreachable. This allows access to a wealth of natural resources and makes available maritime trade routes that are thousands of nautical miles shorter than transits using the Suez Canal or Panama Canal. The strategic importance of this region, the Arctic, is unquestionable. Arctic security is American security. Despite that, we as a country are not properly postured to secure our vital national interests in this region. America is an Arctic nation because of Alaska. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciated a little bit of the history on my great state. By the way, $7.2 million, probably the best real estate deal in the history of America. Maybe the Louisiana Purchase, but they're both close. 2 cents an acre. My state is at the forefront of Arctic competition and guards the United States against threats from our competitors. We all know, and you mentioned it, Mr. Chairman, we are in a new era of authoritarian aggression led by the dictators Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping. They are running hostile regimes that seek to control access to the Arctic region and, importantly and dangerously, are increasingly working together in the Arctic. Alaska's proximity to both Russia and China requires that my state play a vital role in securing America's interests in the Arctic. You mentioned Billy Mitchell. I never tire. My colleagues on the Armed Services Committee get a little bit tired of the quote, but I'll say it again since you already said it. Billy Mitchell referred to in a hearing in the Congress as Alaska is the most strategic place in the world. Fortunately, we have undertaken a military build up there that needs to continue. Right now, Alaska constitutes 3 pillars of America's military might. We are the cornerstone of missile defense for the entire country. All the radar systems and all the ground-based missile interceptors are based in Alaska, protecting every city in the United States. We are the hub of air combat power for the Arctic in the Indo-PACOM region. For example, we have over 100 fifth-generation fighters located in Alaska, F-22s and F-35s. There's no place on the planet Earth that has over 100 combat-coded fifth-gen fighters. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, we are the platform for expeditionary forces, including the Army's new 11th Airborne Division that can deploy on a moment's notice anywhere in the entire Northern Hemisphere. But we need to make sure that Alaska becomes the logistical hub for the Arctic, for our power projection in the Arctic. In recent years, the Russian Navy has stepped up the scale of its exercises near Alaska. It is doing all kinds of bear bomber runs at our state. They're so common that they don't even make the news anymore, several already this year. Last year, Russia and China, for the first time, deployed a joint naval task force, 7 ships, to Alaska's waters. We responded. I love the Coast Guard, but we responded with 1 small Coast Guard cutter. I called some of our senior military and Coast Guard leaders saying, look, this is going to continue. If it happens again, we need to show a much stronger, robust approach. You may have read this summer, it happened again. This time 11 Russian and Chinese ships operating off the coast of Alaska. To our military, NORTHCOM and Indo-PACOM's credit, they sent 4 destroyers and P-8s to track this very significant joint Russian-Chinese naval task force. But we must make sure that this is a sign of things to come. We not only need more Coast Guard assets, but also a Navy presence back in Alaska. We will need to be able to respond more rapidly in the future to these kind of incursions. Unfortunately, and I love our Department of Defense, the DoD has been asleep at the switch on the Arctic. The leaders on these issues have been the House and the Senate. We have been pressing for provisions in the NDAA, in the Coast Guard bill, year after year to get our Pentagon, and quite frankly our Coast Guard, to focus more on the Arctic. As a matter of fact, right now the NDAA is being marked up. I'm going to hustle back over to the Senate side. It's our conference with the House and the Senate. We have my provision, the Arctic Security Initiative, in this year's NDAA to make sure that we focus on the Arctic. And to your point, Mr. Chairman, the United States has not invested in Arctic infrastructure. The number actually of Russian icebreakers is 54, many of which are nuclear powered. They are weaponized. We have 2 icebreakers, and one is broken. That's what we have. We're building more. We're looking to purchase off the shelf some, but we need to make sure that we are trying to close this very, very significant icebreaker gap. Even China's icebreaking capacity is on pace to surpass ours in 2025. And as you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, they're not even an Arctic nation. We recognize the importance of freedom of navigation transits through the Taiwan Strait and the South China Sea, but we need to do the same for the Northern Sea route from Europe to the Bering Strait. Putin has called this region the new Suez Canal that he will control. We can't let them do that. So I commend the Coast Guard on working to get more icebreakers, commend the Coast Guard cutter Healy that transited near the Northern Sea route near the Russian EEZ for making this difficult and challenging transit. But icebreakers, Mr. Chairman, are only the beginning. The level of infrastructure, domain awareness, reliable comms that are sufficient to support America's security needs in the Arctic are lacking. As I mentioned, Congress has made important progress. We've begun work on a deep water port in Nome, Alaska. That's Western Alaska in the Arctic region that can handle icebreakers, that can handle Navy destroyers. But right now, we have no infrastructure anywhere near the Arctic that can even handle Navy ships and American icebreakers. So we need infrastructure. We need a whole of government effort. We must respond to bolster our presence, both military and civilian, to make sure that we can protect our national security interests, economic security interests, energy security interests, and environmental security interests that are so critical to our national security. I do want to mention one final thing. We need to do this in conjunction with all federal agencies and Arctic communities, especially the very patriotic Alaska Native communities, our indigenous communities that have been living in the Arctic for literally thousands of years and are some of the most patriotic Americans anywhere. So again, Mr. Chairman, this is a critical issue for the 21st century. It's a key area of great power competition against Russia and China, and I really want to commend you and the committee members to taking the time for this important hearing, and just very, very appreciative.